Okay. Hey, this is Meleika of Evanston Live TV, and I have with me today Sarita Smith, and I am loving that she is just very much keeping it real. She's like, look, my kids are here, they're on spring break, there's gonna be some interruptions. I love it. I
Might
love
be a
it.
few, might be a few. Dogs, kids, neighbors, who knows? We'll see what happens today.
I love it. So, Sarita, on the 14th, your name came up like your name was just all over the place for this huge step in Evanston history, the new Fifth Ward School. You have to walk us through because, yes, that was an injustice that took place years ago. And I loved how you all kept paying homage to those back then who were constantly fighting to get the school back. And you all picked up the baton. Not that anybody dropped the baton, you just passed it. Everyone was passing it, passing it, and you all making it a reality. It took like a collective, a community to make this happen. So I know the ancestors, I don't even want to call them ancestors because a lot of them are still with us today. They're still here. So yes, please, girl, walk us through. This is so exciting. It is so exciting.
Yeah, it's interesting. People have been asking me like, have I blogged this journey because of how historic and I'm starting to go back and do some writing now because this is both nostalgic for me, but also like part of my personal journey in life. So I feel like I was put here on this earth and in this wonderful small town to help Black and brown families and marginalized families take back their editing rights. I feel like a lot of our stories have been written for us. And so everything that I could possibly do to give editing rights to those families, I am 100% indebted and committed to. And so this process is nostalgic for me personally because I grew up in the Fifth Ward. So my family has been in the Fifth Ward their entire lives. I didn't even know how impactful this project was to both my mother and father. So my father was one of the first students to kind of get a seat, if you will, at the school when it stopped when it was no longer Foster, but then moved to the King Arts Laboratory School. So he was like one of the first kindergarten groups to come in. Didn't know that until I did this project. My mom told me that she was bused to Lincolnwood and hated it, and wasn't one of those people that couldn't wait to get on the bus or stayed after school for projects because she felt that she just didn't even feel as a part of that community. She was like, I couldn't wait to get on the bus to go home. Like I needed to be back with my people. So I learned a lot in this process, and I was not sure I was going to come to District 65. Actually, I actually had a contract somewhere else and was already ready to go. I'm so sorry. Come and get the dog, Sage. My dog just, I told you.
I love it. Oh, I love it. I love it, Sarita. Ladies and gentlemen, she warned us.
Anyway. But yeah, I had no intentions on working at District 65. Actually, Dr. Horton will often tell you that I'm a converted parent because I was the parent like in the mailbox, like, hey, y'all better do right by my child. I'm not playing with y'all. Get my kids right. Like I didn't trust this district, honestly, as a parent. So it's definitely been an interesting journey to be here talking to you all today.
Yes, well, I was talking to Tanya Booty, the president of D65, earlier this morning, and the people who have taken the seat and those who continued on, it just seemed like a really powerful team that they have right now. Would you say? I mean, because I used to hear a lot of complaints about D65, but I would say this board is really special. There's something special about this group of leaders and Superintendent Dr. Horton. It's just something really special about them. One, they went through a pandemic with no blueprint on how to hell to handle that. you know, they were
Seriously.
receiving death threats on that, as well as them creating more programs to pour into the children. They were
Yeah.
receiving death threats on that, and then to carry on the baton for all those before for the vision of this school. I mean, that's a special group of people.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I think I keep saying, as you alluded to, that like I just happen to be on the anchor leg of the race, right? I feel like this has been a marathon of many for a lot of us, and so many people have really been kind of pushing this charge, and it all the puzzle pieces just weren't quite aligned, right? I think so. I think when we did the referendum, the community was strong, and they were like, "We're ready. We want to do this." They did the work. CB4 was like really instrumental in getting, the Fifth Ward School on the ballot for the referendum. Not quite the right board, right? Not quite the right leadership at that time, or for different reasons had different priorities. And then prior to them, like, there was an equity, Evanston, I'm going to mess up their name, Evanston Equity Group that was really pushing the district to do it. And we had, I think Hardy Murphy might have been the superintendent at the time. So maybe the right superintendent, maybe not necessarily the right community people and board behind him. So it didn't work that time, right? And so I feel like the momentum has never really stopped around the Fifth Ward School. I think this time we not only have people that were kind of talking about it, but that were willing to like really put their necks out for this. I think there's a difference between people in Evanston that say they want it and put the signs in their yard, and people that are willing to be uncomfortable and make it happen. And I think we have board members, we have, leaders in our director seats and our cabinet seats, and obviously our superintendent, who is like, I'm willing to be uncomfortable if that means the betterment of our families that we continue to talk about, but don't necessarily kind of really shift the change, in order to make the real work happen. I mean, somebody told me before, if you're not uncomfortable, then work isn't happening. If we're all comfortable
Right.
doing what we're doing, then we're not changing anything. I think that's one of the challenges in District 65 is people are not often willing to be uncomfortable for the change to happen. They want to do the same thing, but somehow expect different results. And that's just not logical. Like you can't, run the same race and not do anything different and expect to win. Like you gotta change some players, you gotta change some batons, you gotta change your strategy, change your training methods in order to make that happen. I think we have a team that's willing to do that this year.
It's interesting you bring up people being uncomfortable because I've had conversations with non-Black people, and they'll put the signs in the yard, and you know uh, they'll do what they're comfortable with. But when it comes time for like something that's really going to bring about a change, yes, you are going to be uncomfortable. It's going to get tricky. It's going to get sticky. It's going to get ugly. You're going to have pushback that's just things you wouldn't even imagine. And
Yeah.
that's when you know that they're genuine and real, because they know that they're in a position where they're really not going to be impacted. But when we get uncomfortable, put our necks out there, we might lose our job. We
Yep.
might lose our job. We might, all sorts of horrible things could happen to us. But
Okay.
that's when you know they're real.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
and I've seen some interesting shifts in some allyship too. Like I feel like, to your point, like sometimes it's okay to be the ally as long as you're not like shifting anything in your life. But I think there's some allies now, at
Mhm.
least that I've met, talked to, ran into, shared emails with, that are like, if this means that our kids need to shift or move or do whatever in order to make this right, then let's do it. And I like that is very comforting. It's very good to know, that there are a lot of people in this town who understand the history now, because I feel like a lot of people did not know the history. So we spent a lot of time in a lot of our community meetings, like just prepping the history part, right? Like this isn't just
Mhm.
for school, but to know how many kids that we are truly busing in the name of racial integration in 2022, it's a problem. Like, and we need
Yes.
to name that is a problem, and that the moment someone says, well, what about the diversity in schools, that you need to stop and understand whose backs that's on and why you think that's okay, right? Why do you think it would be okay to take a kid from their neighborhood and bus them into yours in the name of integration, like in 2022, right? And we've also talked to a lot of people about, the city of Evanston. Like, this isn't just a District 65 fight, right? Like, the school, replacing that school was one piece of this. But when we think about the boundary lines, our committee was really committed to like looking at, like, is racial integration what we're doing and continuing to do, and as we make boundaries, because that's how our boundaries are currently designed. It's for racial integration, right? It has been since the 60s. The shifts in the 90s were around like the 60-40 rule, where like no school should exceed 60% of a specific racial group. And so we've been continuously kind of, I think, even like unintentionally drawing those lines around that philosophy. And again, pointing to busing skids out of the Fifth Ward. Like, even though the racial integration has shifted in Evanston, like there's not just, Black and brown kids that live in the Fifth Ward. We got Second Ward, we got Eighth and Ninth. Like, it's spread much more south than it had been, in the 60s, but we haven't shifted our practices. And so again, I push those people to think about, like, what does that say to those kids in that community, to say, like, we value you as long as you're supporting racial integration in our school, and that's not okay anymore.
Yeah, getting used.
Yeah.
I thought it was an interesting point you had brought up at that meeting on the 14th. You had said, the wards where it's predominantly Black children that make up the schools, they have the least amount of schools in those areas. That blew me away.
Yeah.
That blew me away.
Yeah, part of my research I spent the first, probably from December to February, before I actually presented the plan a year ago to the board, just doing like research. I had a lot of, again, like anecdotal, a lot of like family knowledge, a lot of Fifth Ward knowledge, because again, I grew up there. But understanding student assignment was a whole nother piece. And student assignment was a relatively new term in District 65 since my position, actually. So we haven't really thought about it in a very systematic way. It's just been like registration and boundary lines, but like really to put this together in a structured way and to think about like our values, which is what student assignment is, hasn't really been a thing in District 65. And so that history was really, really interesting, because I have a map that shows where it's like a dotted map where it shows every student lives in the district. It also it's all color coordinated, where like the lighter blue means less kids and the darker blue or red or orange means more. And you see darker blues, red and orange. And again, Fifth Ward, you see it a little bit in Second and heavily also in Eighth and Ninth. Eighth and Ninth Ward probably almost has double amount of the kids as like Sixth or Seventh. For instance, they have 2 schools, and up north we have 4. And that stuck out to me. Like, there were some conscious decisions well before we got here, and maybe those areas weren't as populated then. I'm not sure, but like the placement of our schools in Evanston is beyond my comprehension. Like, I've been really trying to dig, and even with the schools that we used to have, right, like that closed, and I'm like, a lot of those were still north. Like Noyes was north, and you think of Caravali was like northeast, or I guess Caravali is a little more west, central and west. But like, even where our schools that we no longer have were placed, still kind of lean north, when we know that population wise, that was not the most populated area. So I've just always wondered, and I'm still wondering, based on those decisions, where schools are placed just doesn't make logical sense, at least not from a geographic lens. Like, we're just like, so were most of the people here? Like, what are we doing? So it was so cool, because in some of our student assignment meetings, they were like, well, like, could we just move a school, like physically just pick up a school and move it somewhere else? That would be great if we could just pick it up and move it. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know how that works, but that would be wonderful. Because just, again, like the physical location, how close Bessie Rose is to Walker, for instance, and then right across the street is St. Joan of Arc. They used to be our school too. I'm talking about 0.2 miles, 3 schools. you gotta wonder, like, what was the logic and thought behind some of those decisions. And again, population shifts, things were, I wasn't here in the 40s, 50s, and 60s when these schools were built, but just, yeah, it's a question that's lingering for sure.
Oh yeah, I think we know the answer though.
I have some I have some assumptions.
Yeah, I think we know. But yeah, well, I will say, you know, thank you for not giving up. Thank you for
Mm.
not taking that other position. Because I'm a true believer in God, a higher power. He put all the right people, like you said. Maybe it was the wrong superintendent back in the day. He didn't have this, or she didn't have the support, of a board, or maybe it was the board and not the right. It was a
Yeah.
combination of so many things. And it just seems like now God put everything, all the right players in place to correct this harm.
Yeah.
And all the
Yeah.
pushback didn't work. It's not working. It's not working anymore. It's not working anymore.
No, this has been I mean, I think the board's comments were so moving on the 14th.
Hmm.
I think they
Hmm.
were heartfelt and thoughtful, and called some people out in ways that needed to be. Like, we everybody, when those board seats were open, ran on a ticket on the fifth ward. Every single, I do not know one board member that was running that did not run on that ticket, right? Also, that hired Dr. Horton specifically to figure this out, and for him to be able to use his team's wisdom and knowledge to figure out how to do this without causing more taxes is incredible, and deserves celebration. Like, I feel like a lot is kind of flying under the radar. That's huge, to talk about building a school, to talk about a way to finance it, to talk about a way to pay it off without taxes is insane. Like, no one thought that would happen, right? I mean, Tanya was like, yeah, we was like, hey, Dr. Horton, guess what? We got a whole lot of work to do and we ain't got no money to do it. Congratulations on your job, right? Like, good luck figuring out that. And that's a big ticket, and he has done that. And so I'm just appreciative to be, again, kind of in the right place at the right time with the right people that are, again, willing to be a little bit uncomfortable for the right decisions.
Hmm. Well, we know the always the first excuse for why we can't get something done is, well, there's no money.
Yep.
We're always told, well, it's not in the budget, but then you'll see all sorts of buildings going up, all sorts of things happening that cost millions of dollars.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, yeah.
But
So it was like Dr. Horton, the board, all of you all were prepared for, we know what you're going to say,
yep.
but we've already got to figure it out.
As Tanya said, we had to secure the bag. We we needed to do that effectively. Yeah, there's a lot of moving pieces in this, and I think it is extremely acceptable and normal for people to come and have opinions based on their lens, right? I think it is Dr. Horton and the board's responsibility to have multiple pieces of those lenses to put it together to make sense of it, right? Like, I mean, as a parent, you have an opinion. As a community member, they have an opinion. As a person in finances, they may have an opinion, but there are just so many levels and strategies you have to, like, really consider when it comes to this work. And
Mhm.
it's not singular, right? And I feel like a lot of people have a lot of opinions, especially, and you talk to neighbors and in social media, that are very singular. And you can't make kind of this vacuumed decision or in a school district. Like, it has many layers, more than I could have ever imagined. And I feel like I research things. So usually when I come to complain, I'm like, and here's the dates, and here's the statistics, here's the links to the article. And even then, I'm like, man, I missed like several other pieces of this, right? Because you got to
Mhm.
be in the work to really understand how complex and how layered it is. So I appreciate. And I'm honestly honored to even be in a position where I could thoroughly explain like this process and what we've been through over the last year to come up to this decision.
I can only imagine you have lost so much sleep, like, because I was looking at the presentation and the layout, and I mean, and just you describing the pins. You did a pin for like all the students, a huge map. I, I'm like, did this girl sleep? Like,
Woo.
did you?
Look, I look, my husband will tell you I don't sleep anyway, so I'm made for the job. Yeah, I go to bed at midnight at the earliest. Like I'm just like I'm not. I do my best work comes like after like the day is done. I've had time to process everything. My kids are asleep, and then like my spark happens. Like I just process that way. So yeah, I'm a night owl a little bit. So that was probably helpful in this in this role. 'Cause, whew, yeah.
Well, we appreciate you. We thank you so much, Sarita, for the long nights and having that type of mind that you have to all that research and breaking things down. And I mean, that had to that's so much detail.
Yeah.
So thank you. Thank you for
Thank
bringing all of that to this community. And it's a gift that's going to keep on giving. To me, this is reparations. This
you.
is reparations. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
we had a really talented team of community members. It was very good because I think the layers are one piece of this, but like having multiple views at the table was huge for us, right? Like the district could have come in and say, "Here's our plan," right? Like, and let's vote on it. Like that would have been easy, but we just had some that SAP team is good. Like they push back. Like we did not always agree. I mean, we have, some people from the Fifth Ward that were newer on that, newer residents on that team. And then we had kind of the old school Fifth Ward people. So those conversations were interesting. We had a lot of people, some newly magnet parents, right? Where we had to make some hard decisions around magnet schools on that team. So it was really good to have such a dedicated group to really kind of push our thinking and to come up with these processes. We did so many like our consultant did so many strategies to help us come up even with just our subcommittees and what we would do in them, and she like always made worksheets for us to go off of. Like it was a very like data driven but specific kind of process, and that was super helpful to kind of get to muddle through like the emotions of it, right? Because this could be really emotional work. And we
Mhm,
really had to push the SAP committee to think about data, right?
mhm.
Yes, this affects your child this way, but how does it affect your whole blocking community, right? And move kind of past our own personal agendas, but making sure that we centered on that, right? Like, so there were some very specific key players around, SPED, excuse me, I'm using jargon, special education needs, bilingual needs, right? Like that we're
Yes.
really pushing to say, like, well, if you do this, how does that affect them this way? If you do that, right? And
Mhm.
if we change permissive transfer, what does that look like for a kid like mine who, there's no way they were going to that neighborhood school. So we had those voices at the table. And I think that is why I was so confident in getting up and presenting what we did, because those voices were included every step of the way. And when we disagreed, we really pushed ourselves on what the data said, right? So that was super helpful. So again, just super honored to like represent that team and represent my community, my hood, to make this happen. It's definitely life changing, and I will never forget being a part of this process.
Yeah, so you might have to take this on the road and be a consultant to others I mean, there's been so many schools that have closed down, especially in Chicago. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, they could benefit having your skill set, your mindset. But I know
Yeah.
this one was way more personal because it impacted your parents, it impacted you, and you
Yeah.
want to look out for your kids and your family. And like you said, this is my hood. You want to look out for everybody. So yeah, I'm sure the work would be different if you had to do it somewhere else. I mean, you would apply your skills most definitely, but here
Yeah.
it was personal.
Yeah. But
Hmm.
I mean, I think having someone from the community and specifically from that Fifth Ward was imperative to this, right? So if we did
Hmm.
this somewhere else, I think having that nostalgic voice is
Hmm.
really critical. And that in most of these communities, there's a somebody, right? Like there's a person that's been fighting for it. So I
Hmm.
think that would be.
Oh, we can't hear you, Sarita. Oh, okay. I think we might.
Being
Did we lose
annoying.
her? There she is.
Yep.
There she is.
I am one of like 9 children on my dad's side, so they do group chats all the time, and yeah. My
Well, one thing I'm always, telling residents, like, you can't give up. You got to have a voice. You got to stay engaged. You just don't give up, because someone is listening. Someone is. I mean, oftentimes we feel like we're
Yeah,
not being heard, but there's always someone listening, and you have to keep going. And then there's always someone that's going to come up behind, and you pass that baton,
for
and then
sure.
they're going to add their energy, and they're going to keep it going. And that's
Yeah.
how things get done.
Yeah, and I have to give Henry Wilkins some props too, because I think,
Oh, yes.
he reignited, in a sense, this charge, right? And like, just as a community member, not necessarily connected, right, to Evanston or the Fifth Ward, but to really come in and just be just unapologetic and resilient, to like say, hey, this needs to change. As a matter of fact, I'm not going to be the one to just say it needs to change. I'm going to do something about it. Like, I'm going to take my skill set as just a person and a community member and apply it to this work, and really kind of spark under a little ignition under the board, under community people. Like, I mean, I met with Henry when I was working at the Y around this, right, 3 years ago. So I know him and his team has really been, just on the grind, like trying to make sure that this happens. So I'm appreciative of them. When I think about, those people kind of passing the baton and being a
Yeah.
part of the race, yeah, Henry and his committee has definitely been a part of this as well.
Henry, he never gave up. And I tell him that all the time, like, dude, I love that you're not allowing anything to stop you. And he had a
Nothing.
lot of pushback. He had a
Yep.
lot of pushback. Like, you're not a teacher. You're not even from Evanston.
Yep.
Explain that to me, that people who weren't born here, like, well, so what? We can't love Evanston?
Okay, right.
Like, we can't fight for Evanston? Like, what's up with
Let's go.
that?
They could be a little territorial. I don't know. We a little territorial sometimes. Look great, but I'm a person, like, if you're gonna help, like, come on, like, let's go, let's do it. Like, what's that you have to bring to the table so we can all support?
Yes, yes.
That's
Well,
exciting.
well, Sarita, I'm gonna let you go. We went over our time. I really enjoyed this conversation with you. We definitely have to have you back on. And I
Yes.
I want to just say thank you for your
I
energy and your love for Evanston. Thank you.
appreciate you. Perfect.
Okay. All
Thank.
right. Your kids can have you back now.
Yes. Let me go to my house.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you. All right. This is Meleika,
Bye.
Evanston Live TV, and that was Sarita Smith. You all, we got some amazing people right here in Evanston. Absolutely love them. The energy, the passion, the love for their community. They bring their skill sets, their talent, their vision, and it takes a collective. And that baton, you need to ask yourself, what baton are you passing, or what baton are you picking up and keeping the vision going? And that's how change happens. That's how it happens. So thank you all so much. Stay tuned right here at Evanston Live TV. More amazing people doing amazing things right here in Evanston.